let's be honest, there's a whole lot of fakery out there, especially when it comes to luxury anything. So honestly, because China is everywhere, from your phone to your fridge to the shoes on your feet, if something's manufactured, there's a decent chance some part of it passed through China. And watches? Oh yeah, especially watches. In fact, China accounts for roughly 30%. Here's the checklist. The movement must be Swiss. It has to be cased up, assembled in Switzerland. Final inspection? Also in Switzerland. And as of 2017, at least 6. But wait, aren't some Rolex parts made in China? Alright, cards on the table. Don't really ask where their phone is made, or their toaster, or their running shoes. But with a Rolex, it matters. It should matter. Is Rolex really made in China? Let's talk about it. Alright, let's get this out of the way up front. Rolex is basically the crown of watches, timeless, iconic, and pretty much impossible to ignore. But lately there's been this whisper going around. A little rumour that goes something like, "Hey, did you hear Rolex is made in China now?" Wait, what? If that sounds like someone saying caviar comes from a vending machine, you're not alone. Still, enough people are asking the question that it's worth unpacking. And no, we're not here to shame the curious, it's actually a pretty fair thing to wonder about. The world's gotten weird. Global supply chains are tangled like Christmas lights, and let's be honest, there's a whole lot of fakery out there, especially when it comes to luxury anything. So, let's clear the air. We'll talk about what's true, what's blown way out of proportion, and what's just plain wrong when it comes to Rolex and China. And hey, if you've ever questioned where your watch comes from, you're not alone. So why do people think Rolex is made in China? Honestly, because China is everywhere. From your phone to your fridge to the shoes on your feet. If something's manufactured, there's a decent chance some part of it passed through China. And watches? Oh yeah, especially watches. In fact, China accounts for roughly 30% of all watch exports globally. Not luxury watches, mind you, just total volume. But that stat alone gives the impression that if it ticks, it probably came from a Shenzhen factory floor. Plus, and this is a big one, a ton of fake Rolex watches come out of China. And some of them are scarily good knockoffs. Like, Uncle Jerry's birthday gift made you question everything. Good. That messes with people's perception. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a Rolex that feels just a little too light or ticks when it should glide, you might have been duped. Then there's the rise of legit Chinese watchmaking. Brands like Seagull, Fita, and even newer startups like CIGA Design are putting out seriously impressive work. In fact, Seagull makes over 25% of all mechanical watch movements in the world. Let that sink in. So when folks hear China and watches in the same sentence, they start making assumptions, even when the name Rolex gets tossed in there by mistake. But Rolex? Let's slow that train down for a second. Here's the real deal. Rolex is still very, very Swiss. Let's talk facts. Rolex was founded in London in 1905 by Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis, but by 1919 they moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and it's been Swiss flags and cheese fondue ever since. Now, when we say a watch is Swiss-made, it's not just a fancy label, it's a protected designation under Swiss law. Here's the checklist. The movement must be Swiss. It has to be cased up, assembled in Switzerland. Final inspection? Also in Switzerland. And as of 2017, at least 60% of the manufacturing costs must occur within Swiss borders. Rolex doesn't just meet these requirements, they blow them out of the water. By most estimates, over 90% of a Rolex's value comes from Swiss manufacturing. That includes in-house movement assembly, dial and case crafting, bracelet manufacturing, and of course, final assembly and testing. And that's not cheap. In fact, Rolex owns and operates 4 giant facilities in Switzerland, in Geneva, Bienne, Plain-le-Ouat, and Chennebourg. Each one specializes in different aspects of the production process. For example, Bienne handles the movements, while Plain-le-Ouat is where Rolex smelts its own gold and builds its cases. Yeah, you read that right. Rolex doesn't even trust anyone else to make their gold. So while a few screws or springs may be outsourced globally, the heartbeat of a Rolex, the movement, the case, the bracelet and the quality control is 100% Swiss. But wait, aren't some Rolex parts made in China? Alright, cards on the table? Maybe. And we're talking small non-critical parts here. Springs, gaskets, some raw materials. But sourcing components doesn't mean manufacturing's outsourced. Think of it like this. Your iPhone might be assembled in China, but the brains, the design, chip architecture and software are pure Silicon Valley. Apple is still Apple. Same vibe with Rolex. Even if some base-level components are manufactured elsewhere, they're not handing over the blueprints to a third-party factory and saying, hey, knock us out a few hundred Daytonas. That's just not how they roll. Also, Rolex is famously secretive about their supply chain, like Area 51 levels of secrecy. There are more leaked iPhone photos each year than actual images of Rolex's internal assembly rooms. So while we can speculate on component sourcing, the core process remains unmistakably, unapologetically Swiss. Fake Rolexes and the China connection. Let's get real. The counterfeit Rolex market is booming. Estimates suggest the fake watch industry tops $1 billion per year, and a big chunk of that is focused squarely on Rolex. And yes, a lot of these fakes are made in China. Walk through certain markets in Hong Kong, browse WhatsApp sellers, or dig into shady corners of the web, and you'll see Rolex watches that look alarmingly real. But scratch the surface, sometimes literally, and you'll spot the differences. The second hand ticks instead of sweeping. The weight is off. It feels too light or oddly balanced. The engraving is sloppy or overly polished. Even the logo might be slightly skewed. These watches might cost anywhere from $50 to a few $100. And sadly, some scammers try to pass them off as the real deal. That's where confusion starts. When people hear Rolex and China in the same sentence, they start to assume even the genuine ones might be coming from the same factories. But nope, the real Rolex never shares a production line with its knockoff cousin. Why does it even matter where it's made? This is the $1 million question, or maybe $10,000 question, depending on your model. Why do people care if it's made in Switzerland or China? Because when you buy a Rolex, you're not just buying a watch, you're buying a story, a legacy, a little piece of the meticulous, slow, borderline obsessive art of Swiss watchmaking. It's about heritage, not just hardware. Swiss watches are like the luxury wine of the timekeeping world. You want them grown in the right region, aged just right, and handled by people who've been perfecting the craft for generations. In contrast, mass production, even if it's done well, doesn't carry the same mystique. And Rolex, they've nailed that formula. It's why they're still the king, even in a world overflowing with smartwatches and startup timepieces. In fact, in 2023, Rolex was ranked as the most reputable company in the world by the Global RepTrak 100 report. Not just the most reputable watch brand, the most reputable company, period. You can't buy that kind of trust, you earn it. So, are Rolex watches made in China? Let's end the suspense. No. Some bits and pieces? Maybe. But the design, the assembly, the movement, the finishing, all the parts that matter when you're buying a Rolex, are done in Switzerland, by Rolex, under Rolex standards. That's not changing anytime soon. And that's the real takeaway here. You're not just buying steel and sapphire when you buy a Rolex. You're buying trust. A trust that's been earned over a century. A trust that says, hey, I know where this came from, and it's not some random factory trying to make a quick buck. Final thought, it's more than just a watch. You know what's funny? People don't really ask where their phone is made, or their toaster, or their running shoes. But with a Rolex, it matters. It should matter. Because it's not just about keeping time. It's about how the thing was made, who made it, and why. And whether you're wearing a Datejust or dreaming about a Daytona, knowing your watch was crafted in Switzerland by folks who genuinely care. That's part of the magic. So the next time someone asks if Rolex is made in China, you can smile and say, nope. But thanks for the conversation starter.